All right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our coverage. We don't have any music. Do we have any music? Do we have any music? It doesn't matter.
Sure, we can do some music.
There we go. I mean, let's cut the pretense out. It's COVID time. We're tuning in for the vice presidential debate. Mike Pence versus Kamala Harris. The only thing I can tell you about what I predict will happen tonight is that the plastic barriers between them will not fall. I imagine that they have been very carefully placed and anchored, and I think that'll be fine. Can we get a? Can we do like a some type of gallery? Can we get the image of the what's going on with the debate coverage right now? Pop that up just so that we can see the empty stage, see who's talking. I don't know that there's an audience. Maybe there's a small audience. In a million years, you couldn't pay me to get into that building for to watch the debate. I'm happy to watch it over TV. There it is. It's okay. She's there. That's Susan Page. She is the USA Today Washington bureau chief, based upon what I am seeing on the screen. And she is basically giving the rules, I guess, to people there, which is, I think, primarily stay away from any of the Trump staffers, because they could very well have COVID and have either refused to take a test or have ignored the results of their test. They have total disregard for other people's health and safety. I'm guessing this is what she's saying. I can't tell for sure. And this is the look of terror on people's faces as they realize there will be Trump officials there, and that they could be subject to catching COVID. And then she's probably saying, please don't yell out in fear. You decided to come here. You knew what you were getting yourself into. And there you go. I think she's sitting down, she's probably going to introduce the two play. I would imagine Mike Pence is going to try and come off as being completely civil, and is going to attempt to do this debate in the fashion of a normal debate. I think Pence, in the back of his head, may very well be thinking, who knows, in 2 weeks, maybe I will be the nominee. Or he could be thinking, I'm running for 2024 right now. So Mike Pence is probably going to be the only person associated, and this is a total guess on my part, the only person associated with the Trump campaign who's actually going to make an attempt to broaden the appeal, because he's not necessarily running for this time around. As I said today on today's program, I think that Mitch McConnell has a sense that Donald Trump is going to lose, or at least that the odds are that he's going to lose, and the odds are that he is going to lose. I think it is pretty clear that Donald Trump is not going to get more votes than Joe Biden. It just seems, never say never, I guess. But if you look at the polling relative to Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden is doing significantly better than Hillary Clinton is. I think there's still a chance that Donald Trump could win the Electoral College. And certainly a chance that there's going to be a lot of sort of obstacles to a clean result to this election, which could increase the chance that Donald Trump wins. But from an odds perspective, I think you'd have to be nuts to assume that Donald Trump is going to win in terms of sheer votes at this point. But I do think that Mike Pence is going to be playing for an audience that he perceives he will have in the future. I mean, who knows, over the course of the next 4 years, Mike Pence, I don't know, maybe he'll become the president of the Heritage Foundation and do something, or he'll just he'll leave his family and find his true essence. We don't know. But I think at this point, and neither does Mike Pence, but at this point, Mike Pence is thinking 2024 or 3 or 4 weeks from now in case something happens to the president. I mean, we did see a video message from the president tonight that was released. I only saw a clip of it. I know that he did not know the name of the medicine or the cocktail that he was on, apparently, or that he had been used to treat him, but he was pretty excited about it. I'll also say that it looked like they spent about a half an hour slathering on spray tan or goop tan or whatever it is that they use. And there was a quality of the amount of tanning makeup that they had plastered on him. We'll play this tomorrow on the show. That made me feel like, wow, they're very self-conscious. You know, I find that when I am in my, this has obviously been a very frazzled time, and, everybody's on edge for a myriad of reasons. And I find that when I'm feeling like that, that's when I shave and brush my hair. And I get the sense that Trump felt like he looked like a corpse and was like, just keep putting it on. Keep putting it on. I want to look super tan. Now, it's not possible that Donald Trump is tan from the sun because it's not that hot out in Washington, D.C. And if he went on the roof to do like some tanning session, I think we would see it. We would have probably seen or heard about it reported. No, he's been inside, and he's probably looking a little clammy. And he said, slather it on to the poor soul who was tasked with getting that close to him in his infectious state. I mean, it seems unlikely that he's not still contagious, but who knows? But based upon, the readily available science, it seems highly unlikely that he's not still contagious. But again, who knows? And so what are we seeing now, Brendan? Is this just there's nothing
looks like
happening?
Susan Page and an empty stage.
And who's talking back there? Nobody?
There's no audio going right now.
Okay. Maybe I should take, see if I can take some IMs, maybe. It hadn't even occurred to me, but heck, why not, folks? I don't know if you've checked out the show on Peacock, folks, but Peacock is free. You can what's my password? Oh, there we go. You can check it out on Peacock. Peacock is free, and you can see the show. They put different graphics on. That looks pretty good. And then they have that funny picture of me, which everybody seems to get a kick out of. And you can see the graphics. It's interesting. I like the graphics that they put on there. And they also, when Matt and Brendan show up, they add voice of, I think they use your full names, guys. Brendan Finn and Matt Leck, producer. Because they, it occurred to me. Oh, here we go. This is.
Good evening. From the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, welcome to the first and only vice presidential debate of 2020. Sponsored by the Nonpartisan Commission on Presidential Debates.
I should also tell people
I'm Susan
I'll be
Page
drinking
of
during
USA
this.
Today. It is my honor
I
to
know my
moderate
daughter
this
is watching,
debate,
but I'm sorry.
an
This
important
is
part of our
part of
democracy.
all political coverage.
In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
I should also say that while they're coming out, that I have some rice crackers that I'll be indulging in as I get drunker through the evening, as I anticipate that I will. What's going on in that White House? They better cut back on the carbs because Mike Pence looks huge too.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery
who the we is
and for the
there.
recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus.
I'll sign up for that, but not.
The two
not
campaigns and the
specifically about
Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days.
I'm not sure why you would
than
ask
in the
this
week
question
before.
first of Harris, but
9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses? and
believe that
schools
it's
and
not a
restaurants?
hoax?
A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan.
she's got to say,
They still don't have
even
a plan.
as he
Well,
mocked Joe
does.
Biden
And our plan is about
and
what
his
we need to
mask
do around a
wearing,
national
Donald Trump was
strategy
infected with it.
for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited
Thank you,
their
Senator
right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the
I'm willing to bet
administration's
everything I own
coronavirus task
that on
force.
Twitter right now,
Why
conservatives are
is the
saying
U.S.
that
death toll
Pence has
as a
to debate
percentage of
both
our
the
population
moderator and
higher than
Kamala
that
Harris.
of almost every other wealthy country and you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. Our nation has gone through a
Sorry,
very
I can't
challenging
infect
time
you.
this year.
It's COVID.
But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China, President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done. And that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources and support they needed.
I'm going to talk over some
And
of
we
this. I'm
began
sorry, folks.
Really before the month of February.
The bottom
we
line
started
is the
to
problem
develop a
is
vaccine
that the
and
narrative
develop
that they have
medicines and
pushed is that this
therapeutics and
isn't
saving lives all along the way.
serious.
And under President Trump's
And so
leadership,
when he
Operation
responds
Warp Speed,
with that, we
believe
took
we'll
this
have
seriously.
literally tens
It
of
cuts
millions
against
of
the
doses
own
of
narrative
vaccine before the
they've been
end of
pushing to
the
their
year.
own people.
The reality is, when you
And
look at the Biden
everyone
plan,
else
it
doesn't
reads
believe
an
that they
awful
took it
lot
seriously. So
like
they're in
what
a bit of a
President
bind
Trump and I
here.
and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the
Thank you,
health
Vice
of America
President.
first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be
Thank you,
proud
Vice
of the
President
sacrifices they have made. It's saved
Thank you,
countless
Vice President
American
Pence.
lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then, thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
But Susan, this is important.
Susan, I
want to
have to
add,
weigh
but
in
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
Yeah, you
So
can have
I
15 more
wanna-
seconds, and then we'll give the Vice President
Thank
a
you.
chance to
So I
respond.
want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm
Thank
were
you.
you
Thank
when
you,
your
Senator
children
Harris.
couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice.
What
to
the American people have
sacrifices
done?
The American people have made.
I'm referring
The
to
reality,
the
if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has
I never
boundless
let him in the
confidence
Oval
American
Office. That
people,
was
and
the
he always
smart
spoke
part
with
of my
confidence
part.
that we get through this together.
Never let him do
But
it.
when you say it hasn't worked,
Never let him do
when
it.
Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. Now, that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also
Thank you,
said
Vice
to us if
President
we did
Pence.
everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice
Now,
President
one
Pence.
life lost is
Thank
too
you.
many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit. for the
my gosh.
sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first.
How about tell them to stop? You're the moderator,
Thank you,
remember?
Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there.
What?
How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID
Susan, I'm glad
when
you
you
asked
at the
that
White
question.
House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic,
Does he think that people
when we were
can't hear the
losing
question?
a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work
Bobby Big
of the
Wheel on
President of the
Twitter.
United
Susan
States
Page
goes
demand that
on.
Mike Pence put on
The
a pulse
vacancy on the
oximeter.
Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney
Yes,
Barrett.
thank you. Thank you, Vice
But at
President Pence.
that, if I may say, that Rose Garden
No,
event,
shut up.
there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan,
Is she
actually
just
were
going to let him keep
tested for
talking?
Coronavirus. And
Like,
it
how
was an
come he doesn't have to
outdoor
follow the
event, which
rules?
all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is
Is
President
is Harris going to get another extra minute and a half?
to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but
Oh, my God.
the government takeover of health care,
Thank you,
the
Vice
Green New
President Pence.
Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage
Which we've
to be a
always
leader
done.
speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked
No,
about
Vice
It is
President
asking
Pence.
too much of the people.
Look-
That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect
Susan,
their
the
parents
President-
and
No,
their
I'm
children.
sorry. Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's
I meant
fine,
to
I'm
say-
Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it. Absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have
Mike,
2
it's going to
minutes
go
without
to
it.
Ivanka.
Well,
Ivanka
Susan,
will be
thank
president.
you, although I
So
would like to go back.
that's the way it works on
I
that.
think we need to move
That's-
on.
that's
to
the way it
the
works.
issue of
But I would like to
vice
go back.
presidency.
That's the way it
Because
works.
the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time. in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you,
Who does he think
stop
he's
playing
appealing to?
politics with people's lives.
Oh, my God.
The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal.
She better not let him go over time on this.
But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national
We
stockpile
learned how to do
empty.
everything wrong,
They
too.
left an empty.
We
and
did
hollow
it doubly
plan, but
wrong.
We
Thank you,
still
Vice
learned
President
from it,
Pence.
and I think
Vice
the
President
American
Pence, your
people,
time is
I'm going
up.
to say again, can be
Vice
proud
President Pence, I'm
of
sorry, your
what
time
we
is
have
up.
done. And Senator, please
Thank you, Vice
stop
President
undermining
Pence.
confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked
Sure.
Vice
Well, he
President
didn't answer
Pence,
it, did
which
he?
is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans.
Tell it to Steve
And then,
Mnuchin,
of course,
but-
now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released a sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm.
I
until
thought
the
I said I was
2016
healthy.
election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers
feel
or refused
great.
to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the president, and the First Lady, how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being.
So everybody
of the
remember that
President,
clip where the
and
president,
will
where
continue
the
to do
doctor
that.
refused to
And
answer
I'm
the
just
question as to
extremely
whether he had
grateful
been on
and
oxygen?
was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions, genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information
hasn't answered a
about
single
presidential
question.
candidates, and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing...
She needs to
this
start
kind of
just indicating,
Absolutely. And
I'll
that's why
answer this
Joe
question,
Biden has
even
been
though
so
Mike Pence won't.
incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000? And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency.
I don't
Because it
think
has
this
to be
is
across the
necessarily
board.
Russia
Joe has
stuff.
been
I think it is
incredibly
Russia stuff
transparent
maybe for the people
over
who receive it.
many,
But there
many
is a
years.
question, like,
The one thing we all
who does
know
he owe
about
the money
Joe,
to?
he puts
And
it all out there.
is he not operating
he
the
is
presidency in
honest,
such a
he
way
is
that is going to
forthright.
dig him out of that hole?
But Donald Trump, on the other
Hard to
hand,
believe that
has
he's
been
not.
about
I don't know if he
covering
owes
up
it to
everything.
Russia or he
Thank
owes
you,
it
Senator Harris. I
to,
want
I
to
don't
give you a
know,
chance to
whatever
respond,
bank it
Vice
is.
President.
But
Well, look, I respect
He owes it
the
to
fact
somebody.
that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But
Where?
the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you,
and
Vice
turned
President.
this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation,
Thank you,
unleashing
Vice
American
Can you cut him
energy,
off, please?
fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's
Thank
on
you,
the
Vice
line
President
if
Pence.
Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good
White
segue into our third
great
topic,
segue.
which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing.
Nobody else
Which is
would
why
have
he
been
passed
able to
a
do it.
tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer, uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. Because when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of four had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of four increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think, Susan. I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, save 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally have spared no expense.
$4 trillion
to the American
did not
people
go
and the
directly
American
to
worker through
families.
this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris
like $3
want to
trillion of
raise
that ended up
taxes.
going directly
they
to
want
corporations.
bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban
And
fracking,
hamburgers.
which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth
Thank you,
and
sir.
opportunity,
Thank you,
4
Vice
more years of President Donald Trump. 2021
Thank
is
you,
going to
Vice
be the
President
biggest
Pence.
economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000
He said
a
he's going to
year.
repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well, wait,
I'm speaking.
it'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break.
Don't let him keep talking.
That is-
Senator,
Don't let him keep talking.
Absolutely not true. That
is he
tax
only
bill,
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If
That's
you don't
right.
mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections. If
She
you
should
have
be hitting this
pre-existing
almost
conditions. And
exclusively.
this is very
The
important, Susan.
Democratic
And it's
compulsion
important
we need to
to
give
actually
Vice
answer the
I'd just
question
like-
when
he
we've seen
interrupted me,
Pence
and
just
I'd like to
completely
just
avoid
finish,
questions.
please.
Just hit the talking points.
If you have a pre-existing condition,
They're going to take away your
heart
health care.
disease,
Here
diabetes,
we go.
breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition,
Thank you,
they're
Senator
coming for
Harris.
you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're
Let me
welcome.
give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well.
It still exists, you
President Trump and
idiot.
I have a plan to improve health care and to protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not
You're not
entitled
entitled
to
to your own
facts.
facts. There we go.
You yourself said on
Somebody's got
multiple
that phrase.
occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has
the way
made
she phrased it.
wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more
There's
damaging?
controversy,
You
or
have
he's
2
just going to
minutes
ignore
and
the
then
question.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation.
Clean air.
According to all of the best
Pure
estimates,
water.
our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded. And our water is among the cleanest in the world.
I did.
And
You
just
got
a
it
little
right.
while ago, the president signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. you know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation. And we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom
They're not
from your state
sweeping.
has
They're
agreed
not
we've
sweeping
got to work on
the
forest
forests.
management. And with regard to hurricanes,
Clean water,
the
clean air.
National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually, as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes today than
Thank
there
you.
were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
President Pence,
use
I'm sorry, your time
hurricanes
is up.
and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President
goods of a
Pence.
Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President
American
Pence.
workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So, first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, you know, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings. Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential
I'm not
threat?
going to answer that question, but I'm not going to say I'm not going to answer.
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate.
He took a moment to figure out
that
where he was
day
going to
one
pivot to.
was
We're going to go
to
back to
repeal
taxes.
some tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of four across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website.
I mean, the problem
And
to a
as
certain
USA
extent
Today
is
said,
that
it's essentially the same plan
the
as you
entire
co-sponsored with
Biden
AOC when
campaign
she submitted it in the
is
Senate.
fundamentally
You just heard the senator
rope-a-dope
say that she's going to resubmit
and
America to the
defensive.
Paris Climate
So
Accord.
she will not get as
American
aggressive.
people
And obviously, I think
always
there's
cherished our environment. We continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2.
I think that they
emissions through American
probably
innovation and the development of
have legitimate concerns about how she will come off if she gets too aggressive with Mike Pence because of the nature of the way that people perceive women and the way that people perceive women of color.
Thank you, Vice President.
But man, I would pay good money to watch someone
Thank you, Vice
put
President.
America first. He's going to put
punch
jobs
him in the
first,
mouth.
and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you,
But
Vice
on
President.
the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
let's talk about that.
Metaphorically, of course.
The vice president earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the president's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know, I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
Well, I'd love to respond.
I'm going to take 2 minutes if you don't mind.
Trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China over the last several decades.
Come on, man.
And
Go
again,
China. Go
Senator
communists.
Harris, you're
Go
entitled to your opinion.
Chi-Coms.
You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created.
Are people saying that
the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we
Pence
bring
has
our
pink
nation
eye?
through
Thank you, Vice
this
President
pandemic?
Pence.
But a
Mr.
Green
Seeing
New
people on
Deal,
Twitter
passive
say that
new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to
Pence
kill
has
jobs
pink
this
eye,
time,
and
just like it
that is
killed
a
jobs.
I just need to respond
symptom
very
of COVID.
15
I doubt he
seconds.
has
Thank
it,
you.
but
Thank
who
you.
knows?
Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry,
Ew.
and you voted against it. So let's set the
Doesn't
record
look good.
straight.
Maybe he's just sad.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So now, with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost,
Newsweek, call your office.
China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people...
The first cases
Joe
of
Biden
coronavirus in this
opposed
country
President
came from
Trump's
Europe
decision
anyway.
to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was...
Thank
Ben
you,
Shapiro
Vice
is
President.
now
President
parsing the
Trump
words
stood up
Your
to
time is
China
up.
with
existential
continue to
threat. He's
stand
saying
strong.
that
Thank
would
you, Vice
mean it
President.
would
We
wipe
want to
out
improve the
everybody
relationship
on the
over
planet,
level
as
playing
opposed to
field. We're gonna
like
hold
Vice President
China
Pence.
accountable
80% of the
for what
world's
they did to
population.
America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. Got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, Russia, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the commander-in-chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He has walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
I mean, there's a lot of
thank you.
pablum there, but I
President
think
Trump
that was a
kept
pretty
his word
effective
when we moved
answer.
the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more
Did
to
Joe
our common
Biden promise
defense
that?
than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, two of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other Beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look,
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about
Cut 'em off.
the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President
terrorism.
Pence.
President Donald Trump got us out of the
You
deal.
need to
Vice
say,
President Pence.
stop
And
talking,
when Qasem
Vice
Soleimani
President.
was
Stop
traveling
talking.
to Baghdad,
Thank you,
Vice
Vice President.
armed to Americans.
Stop talking, Vice
President
President.
Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
Stop
And
talking,
America
Vice
is
President.
safer. Our
Stop
allies
talking,
are safer. And the American
Vice
people
President.
know President Donald Trump will never
Thank you,
hesitate.
Vice President.
Stop
action.
talking.
I would like to give
Vice President.
Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
Oh, I
Like
guess
people-
she'll get
Yes.
less time than he will, in other words. I mean,
First of all, to the Mueller family, I
don't even want to hear her
about
talk,
your
and it's still not
daughter's
fair.
case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them?
how
Because,
is
of course, he only thinks about what's in it for
She
him.
not bringing up
Let's
the
take
whole
what
suckers
he said
thing.
about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is?
I feel like
It's
that report
somebody
was
puts a
walked back
price
little
on
bit.
your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank
Joe
you.
Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing
She should
their
have brought up the
lives
thing that
for the sake
dominated
of
the
our
news for 3
democracy and our
days.
safety.
Thank you, Senator
Which
Harris. This
was
is such
that
an
he
important issue,
said
but we have other
the
important
dead
issues as well.
Marines-
I want to make sure we have a chance
Buried.
to talk about.
Respond to that.
In,
She has
I think it was
15
France.
seconds because
We're
we're
suckers.
trying to
More
keep.
than that. Look.
Well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
Look,
Pence, you've had more time than she's had so
the
far.
slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice
My
President
son is
Pence.
a captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you,
She's
sons
got
and
to
daughters
be
serving
more
in the
aggressive
military.
with this. You can't
President
just give
Donald
up
Trump
now
not only
that he's
respects, but
talking actually
reveres
longer than you would
all of
actually
those who
said. I
serve
mean,
in
this
our
is
armed
just
forces, and any suggestion
ridiculous.
otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank
me
you,
also
Vice
say-
President Pence.
Stop
Vice
Stop
President
saying
Pence.
thank you.
Susan,
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people
I
deserve to
didn't,
know.
Vice President
there's a
Pence, I did not,
pattern that you
excuse
can't
me,
deny.
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden
Your
and
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's
I-
debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you,
Go right ahead.
which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Yes. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before. The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable. Because history records that
It's
Joe Biden
not
actually
explainable,
opposed
but it's
the raid
explainable.
against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President
So
Pence. Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place,
Keep saying
you,
your
Vice
time is
President
up.
Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett
Your time
will
is
be
up.
respected.
Thank you,
treated
Vice
Your time
President
is up.
Pence.
Stop
voted and
saying
confined
thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United
He's
States.
not
Senator
listening
Harris,
to you.
You're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, before, when this conversation has come up, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice
ACA,
President.
go right to the ACA.
But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true
Harris.
leadership.
You mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court.
Except for the ad
the
that she
United
placed in the
States,
paper
but,
and signed saying
we'll
that
continue to stand strong for the right to
that
life.
Roe v. Wade should
When
be
you speak
overturned.
about
I mean, she was
the Supreme
explicit
Court,
about it.
though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years.
It didn't in the year
If you don't get
2016.
win. This is a classic
Had
case
8.
that if you can't win by the rules, You're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
No, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. I'm speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election. And it was 27 days before the election. And a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And
Senator
the
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once again gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
the
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about
we
the
like
issue
white people. I mean, that's
racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So I think
Thank
maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer
he
the question, but I think
does
the American
this.
people know the answer.
He
Thank you, Vice
avoided
President.
multiple questions, and she did not point
In
out.
March,
you
Breonna
need
Taylor,
to point
a
it out like
26-year-old
this.
emergency room technician in
You need to
Louisville,
even
was shot
just
and
say
killed
that, even if it's not
after
the
police
case.
officers executing
it's been
a
the
search
case
warrant
multiple
in a
times.
narcotics investigation broke into her apartment.
She's got to keep hitting
The
the
police said
ACA.
they
That's
identified
healthcare. Is
themselves.
the
Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is the time
Is that
for
decriminalized
leadership
marijuana? Has that been out there? Or is that just they won't legalize it? I didn't.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks
Excuse me.
for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. It was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African Americans.
Thank you, Vice President
Record unemployment, record investments in
Pence,
education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President.
I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the president of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris,
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we
Senator
all
Harris,
have so much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
I really need to make this point. When you were DA
you say
in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. The reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
We fought
Pence.
for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. There is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator
I
Harris.
would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to pose I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as vice president? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military. We revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing
She's got to
American
say he didn't
We
answer the
conservatives
question
to our federal courts at every
because
level. And we stood with
we,
the men and
the
women of law
audience, are
enforcement
not
every single
bright
time.
enough.
I think that
Apologies
movement
to
of
everybody
Americans
to
has
know
only
that he
grown
didn't.
stronger in the last 4
She,
years.
Harris,
When
needs
you
to
talk
point
about
out
accepting
he didn't
the
answer the
outcome of the
question. That's
election,
disturbing.
I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know
He's
we're going
going
to have
for it.
confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans.
Oh, Jesus.
When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, How are the citizens supposed to get along? And then she added, your examples could make all the difference to bring us together, end quote.
That sounds like a question
So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take one
an eighth
minute
grader who
and
really
respond to Brecklin.
is
Vice
not
President
that
Pence, you have
sophisticated
one
would
minute.
make.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question.
No, it isn't.
And
I mean, it's a good one for an
let me
eighth
just
grader,
commend you for
but
taking an
we're
interest
all
in
adults,
public
and there's a
life.
reason why eighth graders don't vote.
I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe
I've got
in
a
free and
question
open exchange
asked
of
by
debate.
someone who is in
And we
10th grade.
celebrate that.
She
It's
lives
how
in
we've
Brooklyn.
created literally the
She happens to be
freest
my
and most
daughter.
prosperous
Here's
nation
the question
in
she
the
asked.
history of the world.
Why is the mofo lying?
I would tell you that
That's a good question.
don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court,
And
the
who
late
we
Justice Antonin
celebrated
Scalia.
at a party where we all
They
got
were on
COVID.
polar
So
opposites
that was a crazy
on the
party.
Supreme Court of the United States. One very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight.
I just want to remind you, his
when the debate is
administration
over,
literally
come together
kidnapped
as
babies.
Americans.
Babies.
That's what people do in big
Babies.
cities and small towns all across this country.
Babies.
So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that
Brecklin,
we're going to work every day to have
you shouldn't get
government
along
as
with
good as our
people who kidnap babies.
The American people each
There's a
and
reason
every
for it.
day
It's
love a
not
good
just
debate.
happenstance.
We love a good argument, but we always come together and are always there for one another.
This is
Thank you.
a
Times of need.
categorical
We've
lie.
especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
Grow up.
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her
Brecklin's
words, when
not
I
a
hear
leader.
your words, Brecklin,
I understand why
know
she
our
needs
future
to
is bright
pretend like
because it is that perspective on who
Brecklin's
we are,
question
who we
is
should
legit.
be, that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire
Pivot
to.
here and say, but there
And
are
that,
real
you know, that
differences.
brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. You mean you have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator Harris.
determine the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19.
I'll do it
The
with the other
second
people.
presidential
That's so much.
debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall style debate in Miami.
I'm
We hope
feeling
you'll join us
great.
then.
So great. Never felt better. Look at how much makeup I've caked on my face. Now he will take the pink eye, will walk off the stage, and you will notice that, ooh, thank you for the COVID, honey. Thank you for the COVID. Could you rub that pink eye on my face more, please, sweetheart? I am your handmaiden. Please rub the pink eye on me. I mean, of course, I'm joking. We don't know for a fact that Mike Pence has pink eye, and we don't know that every instance of pink eye at this time is an indication of early symptom of COVID. We don't know that. I certainly don't know that. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I mean, let's face it, I'm not really anything. But maybe Mike Pence was just tearing up. He was so proud to have the opportunity to be on stage that one of his eyes started to tear up and develop a lot of eye mucus. That's not inconceivable. I think that's very possible. Brendan, how can is there a way for us to like flick on the switch and then flick back on and restart the stream here for a wrap up?
We'd have to create a new event in YouTube.
And how difficult is that on a scale of 1 to 10?
It can be done, but it would take a few minutes.
So like an 8.
I would say like a 6 or 7.
A 6. But if you blend in your desire to do it, it's closer to like a 9.5.
That's never anything I consider in this job.
All right. Well, maybe we can cut it after the fact and put it up separately. All right. Can we do that?
Yes.
I guess maybe I'll do it. I'm not sure how I would do it. What do I download it and then cut it?
I can do that.
Seriously?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Is that easier to do? This is great content, folks. I just give you a little behind the scenes. So I had a half a bottle of tequila during that, and it still it hurts just as much. I mean, look, I would say if you're still watching at this point, let me give you this. Let me give you the don't bother listening to the rest of this. One word, or I should say one sentence wrap that all you need to know is this will not impact anything. I don't think, I think in general, vice presidential debates are rather inconsequential. I don't think Kamala Harris did a great job, but I don't think she did a poor enough job that it will make a difference. Mike Pence doesn't have much to work with. There were instances, look, and I'm not even talking from a substance standpoint, right? Because, well, I will talk about a substance in a moment, but just in terms of just pure form. Most of you who are listening to this commentary probably tune into a politics show, maybe hopefully it's the Majority Report, maybe it's others as well, on a regular basis. That puts you in a very narrow subset of the American public who are far more savvy about this stuff. But for the people whose votes could be in play, you need to basically you need to tell and show what's going on. You as a candidate need to both demonstrate and then also do the commentary. So, for instance, there was one occasion where Kamala Harris did not answer the question that was posed directly, and that was the question about whether Joe Biden would support court packing. And I certainly understand. I think it's a smart thing for them not to answer the question. And I think her non-answer was pretty good one, frankly. I would have had some nuance. I would have added some stuff, but I don't know that you could top Honest Abe didn't fill this seat. You could also say, well, the vice president just said that we only had 9 justices. But 3 or 4 years ago, the Republicans made it 8 justices for over a year. So she could have said that, but I think the Honest Abe thing was a good answer. But you'll notice that Mike Pence, on multiple times after that, I think he 3 or 4, maybe 2 or 3 times afterwards said, she didn't answer the question. She didn't answer the question. Now, your average viewer probably didn't even realize that she hadn't answered the question. probably couldn't assess or regurgitate to their friend how Kamala Harris didn't answer the question. But because Pence said she didn't answer the question, those people walk away and say, she didn't answer that question. Mike Pence did not answer the question on about almost a half a dozen occasions. And Kamala Harris never said this. Now, Brendan made a point on the IM during this. We played a clip of Martha McSally during, is it Martha McSally? For a long time, I couldn't get her name right.
You've gotten it right at the end of her career, it seems like. You really nailed it.
Yes.
Not Sally McMartha.
Right, exactly. Martha McSally. So she had a debate the other night in Arizona, and the moderator asked her, do you still feel proud about your support? And she wouldn't answer. And he said, well, I'm going to take that as you do feel proud about your support because you're not answering it. And so I've asked you if you do or you don't, and it sounds to me that you do. Play the clip, Brendan. Go ahead. If you've got it, let's play it. Because this is an example of what did not happen tonight. So Kamala Harris has to do this. You got it? Here it is.
Senator, the question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President
Putting
Trump?
legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support
I'm
for
proud
President
to be fighting
Trump.
for Arizona. The question is, why was he wanting to support Bernie Sanders?
Regarding President Trump, your overall impression of his behavior and his actions in office, your opponent just basically said she's proud of her support.
Okay, so there it is. The moderator tonight was not doing that. All she was doing was thanking the vice president for talking over her, for extending his time. And she was very thankful that he was doing that. Now, she wasn't literally thankful, but she kept saying thank you. And for your average viewer, all they heard was her say thank you to the vice president as if he was doing her a favor by disregarding the rules. So at that point, it's incumbent upon Kamala Harris. And again, this is all delivered with the caveat that you could avoid all of this analysis and just go with what I said at the beginning of this, which is this is not going to make a huge difference anyways. But this is my job, I guess. And, I'm assessing it. She needed to say, he's not answering the question. He's not answering the question. I mean, if she said this even one time after every time Mike Pence did not answer the question, the thing that we would be talking about tonight, instead of my saying how she failed to do this, would be Mike Pence did not answer the question. I mean, this is, and I've made this point in the context of why impeachment was important, and why Democratic oversight is important. It is the functional equivalent of being a filmmaker, and you train your camera on an event or a statement by someone, and in Europe, let's say, they would probably not try and maybe I'm getting too complicated about this, but a very subtle filmmaker would allow you, the audience, to determine what your assessment of that is, of what you've just seen. But in commercial filmmaking, in filmmaking that is meant for masses, what the filmmaker will do is they will add elements to that moment so that the audience knows what they're supposed to feel. They'll put dramatic music in it. They will do a cutaway and get the reaction of somebody. So, for instance, Brendan, say something about, tell me what you had for breakfast today in one sentence.
I had a energy bar.
Okay, that's option one. I've just presented it to you. Right there. Now, Brendan, tell me again what you had for breakfast.
I had an energy bar.
Oh, God. Seriously?
It's an easy way to, I'm working in the morning and I need to just get something down quickly.
Jesus, God.
Gives me energy.
The point is that my reaction, you will walk away from that. The difference between me having no reaction to Brendan having an energy bar and my reaction that is disgusting, it will change your perspective on Brendan having an energy bar, regardless of what you think about energy bars and Brendan having them from breakfast in a vacuum. You can't help it. And what Kamala Harris did not do was to offer that disgusted look. Now, I understand that she has limitations, so I'm not saying that she should look disgusted, because I honestly do think that she is judged on a different curve than, frankly, a Mike Pence is. But all she had to say was, Vice President, with all due respect, I don't know why you're not answering the question, but you're not answering the question. And if she had said that 3 or 4 times, and there were plenty of occasions to say that, everyone would walk away from the debate with the perspective, everyone, I'm talking everyone, specifically the mainstream media, Mike Pence was very evasive during this. That would have been the narrative, because he laid it out there. He offered it up. Everyone knew he wasn't answering the question, but because Kamala Harris was not affirming what everyone knew, then everybody was like, maybe it's not important. So I think there was a missed opportunity there. I think that if I was coaching Kamala Harris at the beginning of this debate, and maybe she was coached this way and she didn't execute, or maybe she was miscoached, I would say, look, there's only 3 things that you need to essentially get to. 1, the general failure of the administration to respond to COVID. 2, the irresponsibility of the administration in terms of COVID. Maybe you wrap that into 1. 2, the fact is that this administration is attacking pre-existing conditions and our healthcare, and has no solution for it. And they will destroy our healthcare, and Amy Coney Barrett will destroy our healthcare. And then maybe I would have hit the part about Donald Trump showing such disregard to the dead Marines in Europe. And why do I say that? I mean, I'm not going to pretend like I am terribly concerned about people who died 100 years ago, but any more than I am the 200,000 people who have died of COVID. I think their deaths are equally as tragic. But when you're out there competing for votes in an arena of low information voters, you look at what over the past 12 months has dominated headlines for a week. And for anything to dominate headlines in a week during this era is stunning, right? I mean, Brendan, you know this. It's like we have news cycles that seem to last like 15 minutes in this environment.
They released, Trump's tax returns, 10 days ago?
Right. I mean, I may have hit that too. Maybe that was 4 things, but that's it. I wouldn't have answered a single other question. I would have pivoted every other question. That's a great question, Susan. And my answer is a 15-second answer. And it reminds me of, I would have gone to one of those 4 things, and I would have just kept going over and over again. I mean, yes, it's all nitpicky stuff, and we're talking about stuff that they're made up, but every opportunity to win this election must be maximized. And I don't feel like she did this.
In a lot of ways, it feels like who can offer the least or, present the least. in any opportunity to be attacked at the end of it.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, I mean, you're right, because the Biden campaign has all been about, like I said, rope-a-dope, be defensive, don't try and stick any limbs out so nothing gets cut off. Josh Fox was on Twitter saying, well, it may be the case that Joe Biden has not vowed to end fracking, but he has vowed to end a reliance on fossil fuels, and ending fracking is a subset of that. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not terribly concerned that they're trying to be evasive about that, because Pennsylvania is a very important state. And if they feel that by not directly saying we're going to end fracking garners them 5 or 10,000 votes in Pennsylvania, a state that they lost by 40,000 votes in 2016, I'm not terribly concerned about it, because the bottom line is them saying that they're going to end fracking and them actually ending fracking is going to be a function of what you folks do in terms of political pressure that is applied. That could come in the form of protests. That could come in the form of strikes. That could come in the form of any other number of ways of communicating that there is intense desire to see this. Right? I mean, we were successful in New York for doing this. So I'm okay with them sort of not saying the specifics and saying the more general thing that we're going to end our reliance on fossil fuels. But all said and done, I don't think this is going to move the needle, which is a good thing, because Joe Biden has a far more significant lead in the polls than I think, even if it's quantitatively not much, much larger than Clinton's, although I think there's some evidence that it is, depending, qualitatively it is. In other words, apparently, in some of the national polling, like this time in 2016, Trump was within a point or two. And it fluctuated. He's never been within a point or two of Joe Biden. I don't think he's ever been within 4 or 5 points nationally. Maybe it's even more than that. Joe Biden, his lead in many of these states, swing states, more or less similar to Hillary Clinton's lead. The difference is he's taking this lead with 50% of the vote in many of these states, whereas Clinton was 2 or 3 points under 50%. So in other words, it's one thing to be up 46-40, but I would much rather be, and that's a 6-point lead, but I would much rather be up 50-45, only a 5-point lead, if I have 50% of the vote, because that means that there's only 5% of the vote out there that is undecided, as opposed to 46-40, you're talking there's 14% of the vote undecided, and they can break a different way. So Biden's lead in these places is much more, I think, durable. We have the whole host of issues in terms of, and Pence tried it tonight to undercut the validity of mail-in ballots, and that represents another issue. But I think the big story is tonight, the race is unchanged. And then maybe the secondary story, we will revisit this in 3 or 4 days, is, he must have had pink eye. We don't know yet. But I don't know. Brendan, we will cover this ground again tomorrow. There's a couple other stories I want to talk about tomorrow as well on the Majority Report, which you can find at noon. Also, I would remind you to check out the AM Quickie, amquickie.com. You can also go to our other YouTube channel, which is Majority Report Live, youtube.com, Majority Report Live. Is that what it is? Is it Majority Report Live or is it Majority Report Audio?
Majority Report audio, I believe.
Try both, folks. I don't know. I mean, if we were a crack organization, we would know that. I, who have been here for 10 years, and Brendan, who's been here for 2 or 3 years, between the two of us, you would think that we would know that. But
I came in here, I entered a crypt when I came here of different passwords and accounts and things like that. And I've been trying to figure it out like Indiana Jones ever since.
I will tell you that in fairness to Brendan, I would imagine that the way that we have organized this, and by we, I probably mean me, has been idiosyncratic. Right? I mean,
I would say quirky and unique and alternative.
Right. Yeah. Let's call it idiosyncratic as opposed to sort of like old cat lady-ish hoarder.
I've never seen anything like it before.
That's Kyle, incidentally. He's just jumping in here. All right. Well, Kyle, have you just been stalking in the background?
I feel better than I have in 20 years. So I was just thinking about that for myself after watching that.
Kyle is on a steroid drip, and
feel great.
I think Brendan just muted you, but all right, folks, we'll be back tomorrow, 12 noon. We'll talk some about this. We'll talk about that story from the DOJ IG report. We will also talk about one of the challenges that exist, not just in the context of this election, although it does exist in this election, and that's where the sort of, I think, the illustration of the challenge is, but in the challenge more broadly of the concept that you can win elections based upon offering more material benefits for people. And you tune in tomorrow, you'll figure out what I mean by that. I think it's a fairly controversial statement. It's a distressing one, in my opinion, but tune in tomorrow, you'll figure out what we mean by it. This is where, if I was set up in my current location to do an outro song, I would, but I'm not. So, see you. Good job. To get to where I want, but I know